Welcome to the Tourism AI podcast, where we talk about all things at the intersection of artificial intelligence and tourism. Today, we're back to our regularly scheduled programming, which is Matthew, Kenny, and I talking about the big stories happening out there in AI and in tourism, and maybe some of the smaller stories. And today, we have a number of different rapid fire stories that kind of collectively kind of tell a bigger picture. So we'll get into that as well. So with that, Kenny, I will let you introduce the session.
Thanks, Peter. So I know yesterday I was like, what do you guys even want to talk about today? Because I feel like there is so much every day. There is so much new stuff dropping. So trying to focus in on what to discuss is always fun. But today we are going to talk about Anthropic's what they just dropped was Opus 4.6, and that Cowork is available for Windows. We also have an article about TripAdvisor with their ChatGPT integration, and we're just breaking down the latest blog that Peter wrote as well. So I think that's what we're going to start with. Peter, in case you haven't read it yet, just released a new blog. It's quite a long read, but it's definitely worth your time and worth your while. It will be coming out in the TIBC newsletter, and it's on our website available to read. And I'm just going to do a little pitch here for Substack as well, because we'll be sharing it there. So if you're not already subscribed to our new Substack channel, or if that's what they're called, I don't know, sign up there, subscribe. So we're going to start there. The blog is called From Chat to Delegation. And this is an awesome article because I think we really have hit that point where, we've kind of graduated from using the chat box and gone into coworker mode. So really, in this article, Peter has kind of rewritten our hierarchy, our stages of the AI adoption hierarchy, because things are just changing so fast. So Peter, let's just get right into this article. You wrote that context engineering matters more than prompting now. So what does this mean? Is it, uploading context files, or what are people misunderstanding about this?
Yeah, so I think it's actually all of almost your whole drive or your whole kind of file structure is now almost becoming context engineering. And so kind of what I mean by that is, we now can connect these tools to our drives, and we can actually just say, hey, go grab this, go grab that, go do this, go do that. And so now what's happening is, first of all, the tools are getting more agentic. And by that, I mean the ability to do what's called tool calling. And tool calling might mean going to grab a file. It might mean going to the internet. It might mean going to grab, in the case of Claude, what is called a skill, which is almost like if you think about a standard operating procedure. So tool calling has many different sort of modalities. And so just to give you an idea to kind of make it real for people. So Claude, Anthropic's AI, Claude, and other AIs or tools are starting to do this as well, are putting what's called skills into their models. And these skills are, for example, how to create a PowerPoint, or how to create a Word document, or how to create a PDF, or how to create an image, or whatever. And so that's just, kind of almost like a tool that it's calling. And so when you ask about kind of context engineering, now it could literally go through your entire drive and find the exact file you're looking for, use it, apply some other file, apply maybe a template that you have, all of these. So I could do these kind of dynamically. And so that's when I mean, we're going from chat to delegation. Literally now it's just, you can say, okay, similar to how you would talk to an employee, hey, listen, go to the Tourism AI Network sort of blog file. I wrote a blog last week, grab it, add these 3 images to it, which are in this file, and turn it into a PowerPoint. So it can do that full thing from beginning to end flawlessly. Obviously there's some prompting that needs to go in there, but some good prompting that needs to make that happen. But, I've been doing this for the last 2 months, and I've been creating, honestly, on-brand PowerPoints, amazing documents, all kinds of different things that I just wasn't able to do 3 months ago. And so now my caveat to this whole conversation around when I say context engineering is kind of like your entire file set is you definitely don't want to give it access to a big, messy, clunky file set with version control problems, and where it's sort of challenging for the AI to understand what's even in those files and what's the most common and the most recent version. So context engineering to me is, we always talk about building kind of the approved context documents that we can add to our AI projects and AI systems. But really now it's about thinking about your entire file structure and either cleaning your entire file structure up so that the AI can understand it, or only giving the AIs access to certain files, which are your AI approved files. So rather than having to go through, 15 years of file history and trying to clean it up, maybe make a new set of files which are basically meant to be your most up to date, super well organized, using all the best naming conventions that both your humans can access and are very kind of well structured and well documented and understood, but also your AI agents can grab and use.
Isn't it funny how I feel like even a few months ago, we were like, "Oh, man, if only AI could do PowerPoint presentations. That's, like, the one thing it can't do well." But it's like, "We're there. We made it."
We made it. And honestly, and I'll just say, like, this article actually was based on my 2026 keynote. So I've kind of gone through and updated my 2026 keynote presentation, and I've added a whole bunch of different frameworks that I've created, and I've added a bunch of different things. But, full disclosure, my entire 2026 keynote, design, words, everything was created by Claude. And so obviously I a lot of effort on my end in terms of creating frameworks, adding the last keynote, telling it how I want to update it. Like it wasn't just like, here, create me a new keynote. But my new whole deck was created by Claude and it's like perfect. Way better than anything I'd be able to create. I'm not a designer. I have a terrible eye for design. It took some of my old slides that were sort of like really messy and gross and ugly and totally cleaned them up for me. It rearranged things for me so it tells a better story. I'm blown away.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, forgive me reading, but I'm just going to read a few sentences from your blog here. So you say AI adoption is three challenges wrapped into one. About 60% of the challenge is people and culture. How do you get your team comfortable with AI? How do you address fears about job displacement? How do you build literacy across workforce? About 25% is systems and processes. So figuring out which workflows actually benefit from AI and mapping your operations, identifying bottlenecks. And only 15 is the actual technology. However, in your experience, most organizations are spending 90% of their energy on that 15% of the actual tech. So I thought that was pretty powerful. Where, like, in through all of the trainings and things that you've done, do you have an example of where clients usually, I don't know, I'm just gonna say waste money, I guess, on AI because they skip the people part?
So that it's a very easy question to answer, which is just give everybody a license to ChatGPT Teams or Claude or Microsoft Copilot, and then don't teach them how to use it. And so you're spending, whatever, $20 a month or whatever it is, depending on the tool, and people are basically using it as a glorified Google search. And guess what? Google now just gives you AI answers as well. So like, just save your money, right? You don't need to get Copilot to do a glorified Google search, right? And so that's just the easiest example of where people, spend money and are all tools all the time. And I also just see this, and Matthew, you're probably starting to see this a lot more because you're doing a lot of training where it's like, oh yeah, I use AI every day. And then you kind of dig into how they're using AI and it's like, man, you are not even getting a fraction of what this tool can do compared to its actual capabilities because you don't know. So yeah, I think that's kind of at the basic LLM model. The reality. I'm going to tell you another story about a client who's actually not in tourism, but it's a client we work with. And this guy spent months all in on AI, listening to every podcast, watching every YouTube thing. You know, he just went deep and he was like, he got convinced because the AI hype crowd out there can convince you that these AI tools are just magic solutions to all your problems. And he got convinced that basically AI is the magic solution. Oh man. And so he started vibe coding. He started doing all these different things. He's not a developer. He's not a coder. And so he just like went all in on all these different tools that all like like all the hype is around. And don't get me wrong, these tools are amazing. But when you actually understand anything about coding, I don't know how to use those tools well. They're getting easier and better, but like, anyways, long story short is, so he basically was like, I'm so disappointed with AI. All these, everybody said it would be able to do all these different things. It should, and I wanted to automate. And so I had a 2-hour meeting with him where I was like, help me understand what exactly you want to do. He told me all about it. And I took it to our development team and they were like, yeah, this is probably a $500,000 build. And so, to me, again, it's like he spent all this time on tools and technology and, he thought it was just going to solve every problem for him. And he wasted a lot of time. Whereas if he probably, spent some time on actually understanding where AI could like immediately provide value to him, where just a ChatGPT account or a Claude account or a Gemini could like move the needle, if where every single one of his employees can get 20% more efficient, like that is what moves the needle. And you can't jump from that to all of a sudden AI is going to automate my entire business just with some vibe coding app. Like it just does not work that way. And so, it's a step-by-step process, right? And so that's just another kind of like, to me, it was like, man. And then actually, even when I got the quote for $500,000, our tech team, our development team was like, yeah, and he actually shouldn't do this because he's not going to be running his business. He's going to be debugging and working on software for one company that is not sellable to anybody else. And so, you know what I mean? Like, I think to
Mhm.
me, it's like all in on the technology, not really understanding the people and culture side and where you can actually make the difference.
Yeah, that's wild. Matthew, I'm going to jump ahead here to you. So, Peter's AI adoption hierarchy, it has these 5 levels, and I'll just kind of go through. Level 1 is explore, level 2 is enhance, level 3 is connect, and then automate and transform. More details about all of those in the blog for whoever wants to go and read that. Where do you find most tourism businesses that you work with kind of get stuck and why?
I would say like level one, maybe level two for sure. I think, level one being that explore phase is more about the free AI tools. And like Peter was saying, right, everyone says that they use AI all the time. And then we kind of dig a little bit deeper and find out that, okay, like you are using it, but maybe you're using it like Google search. So then you are kind of stuck in that because you're not going to be able to get any further. You're not going to be able to, connect these to your tools if you're literally just using it as a Google search. And to Peter's point too, like people, again, even if they get to like level two with those paid tools, they might be approaching it from that perspective of trying to attack that 15% like technology problem piece. Whereas, they haven't taken the right steps for the people side. So that could, prevent them from going any further, even if they're, on these paid things. And, I feel like people can do so much more on a free AI tier if they have the right people systems in place and all of those structures and foundational pieces in place than if they didn't do all of that and had a paid plan. It really is not like necessarily pay to win here with AI subscriptions. It's really about like what your kind of understanding and behaviors are around this, what your team's, adoption is of this, whether your team believes in this is actually going to use it. Because again, if they're not, then you just wasted your money and you were better off like experimenting with free stuff and having them build off of that. And then once the actual behaviors are there and the demand is there, then you get the paid stuff. That's when you can really unlock and move past like level two.
Yeah, and just to kind of build off what you just said, so the article talks about kind of interviewing before instructing and demanding a plan first. So like you said, it's like even on those free tools, if you have these kind of techniques in place, you're going to get the most value out of them. Can you kind of think of a real example where you use one of these techniques and it kind of changed the output quality for yourself?
Yeah, I would say like even something as basic as like creating a new project for like a client. One of our team members like asked me to help him make a project for a client. And so, it's kind of starting from blank there. Like yes, we have SOPs in place for that kind of stuff. We have documents that are required, but to really make a very strong project takes more than just, necessarily updating or uploading a brand guideline. It's really about, breaking that down, understanding what the project will be used for. Is this just for a general voice or is this for, PR or newsletters? And so rather than just kind of taking that approach and just uploading it and then trying to figure out like instructions, basically asking it like, hey, I want to create a project for this. Like basically ask me questions before I do all of this. And I gave it all the documents basically to start from a baseline of, okay, these are the things I'm thinking of uploading. Do these work? Or should I update them? Or should we, get other documents in here? What would be beneficial? And so asking it to do that, it hadn't even given me the project instructions yet because again, I asked it like, don't even do that yet. Like just ask me what is needed or ask me more questions about this. And so then I can bring that back to the team member and to get that information from the client. And so it's like, rather than figuring out down the line after using the project that this isn't actually great and we're getting really bad like outputs from this, it was able to kind of at least critique it to a basic level to ensure that, it's starting off in the best place possible.
And maybe I'll just add to that, Matthew, because we had a situation recently where Claude kind of, I would just say, said some things about a client that were inaccurate in terms of like their service offering or whatever. Obviously, we caught it and fixed it. But also, I think just a best practice just for people here to consider is, is have the AI go through your website and create a list of facts about your service offering, about your, whatever you do, all that kind of stuff. And then once it creates that list of facts, tell it to go through a second time and verify that all the facts are accurate and that you didn't make anything up that's not exactly on the website. And then that gives you sort of starting point. Again, you asked about context, Kendall, in the previous question. It's like, that's a nice starting point context document about here's all the facts. And then in terms of actually building a project and telling the AI how, how to respond, it's like only grab facts from this document. Do not explain the products and services in any other way other than what's in these documents. And then you're pretty much guaranteed it's going to be locked into exactly the facts. And also, just I always tell people, it's also a great way to make sure your website is actually accurate. And so, that's just a good way. For me, negative prompting is something I'm spending a lot more time on, which is telling it what not to do, because that actually helps it to understand, okay, here's what I'm not allowed to do. Here's my do not do list. That kind of actually helps guide it better.
Yeah, I feel like that's something we touch on a lot is just talking with the tools themselves to kind of come up with the best plan possible. I think that's a step that a lot of people miss. So that's great. Matthew, just to wrap up this question here, I just want to get your take on something that Peter says in the article that 60% of adoption is culture. So, in the last few months that you've been working with teams, do you think that that is the real bottleneck, is the culture, or is it that the tools are still too complicated?
I think that the tools can be complicated, but I still think that the majority of the problem or the challenge is culture. And I think it shows up in many different ways. It's not always just that, nobody wants to use these. It's getting people to understand how it works, or, have those advocates for AI in your organization, making sure to utilize them properly. It could be like exactly that, like not utilizing the right people for the right tasks, trying to kind of force things in. We kind of talk about too that, like, we want to approach this from a top down in terms of leadership, but then also from a bottom up where, this can't succeed if we're just getting leadership to push this on. I think, anyone who's worked in any kind of job can know or knows the feeling of, just getting management like throwing stuff down on you and you're actually doing the job being like, this makes no sense. This does not apply to me. And sometimes that could be true, but sometimes maybe it's because you don't understand how it could work for you. And so that takes, actually being explained to you about that. And also from the bottom up perspective, having people in your cohorts, people at your level, advocating for these things or kind of talking you through this stuff, it makes a lot more sense, or it comes off a better way when, your coworker is kind of guiding you through this stuff rather than management kind of like demanding that you do these things. And so from that perspective as well, like, building that understanding, now you're, both sides are kind of in alignment of what is the goal here, what can be done, what is actually needed. Because in the same way that, management might want to use all these tools for a certain result or certain productivity, the actual people doing the work might need the AI for something different. And so we also want to kind of cross communicate and basically go back to leadership and say, listen, this is what your people are saying. And, maybe the process that you originally had planned doesn't really work for them. And so how can we find a good solution that like addresses both problems?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is like one of the biggest use cases or should be a case study, maybe even for like change management. It is wild compared to any other, I feel like, time in history.
Yeah, it's totally different from just like, oh, are we going to update our computers to Windows 11?
Yeah.
It's like this is a very much bigger like foundational shift for sure.
We're all getting a masterclass in it for sure. Okay, we're going to jump into the next story, which is that Anthropic launches Claude Opus 4.6, which is a major performance leap. And then also they just released Cowork in Windows, which is pretty exciting. We said here it leapfrogs Google's Gemini 3 Flash, but then funny enough, as things do, you posted yesterday in our group chat that Gemini was working on releasing something else now too. So as always, things just continue to leapfrog each other. So, just kind of going back to Anthropic's new release, it combines a 1 million token context window with a smarter long horizon reasoning, stronger agentic performance, and better reliability on complex multi-step tasks. I think we've all been using it and testing it and have been blown away by the results. So, Peter, when you kind of dig into Claude's models, I feel like for everybody, especially, maybe I'll just take a step back here when we're even talking to people that are just kind of touching the surface level of the tools. I feel like lots of them don't even know that there's an option to drop down and select different models. And then once you show them, it's like kind of almost overwhelming. Like, when do you select what? So
Yeah.
if you're in a training session, like, how do you explain what models to select and when to use what?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say, Claude Opus is amazing. but it is very token intensive. And so what that means is all of these models use what's called tokens. And so for those people who don't understand, tokens are essentially a word or a portion of a word, which is a unit of measure that AI models use to sort of, it's just a unit of measure, right? So like it might be a long word might be 3 tokens, a short word might be 1 token. And so what happens when we put words into an AI model, it does something called tokenizes it, which is it turns the word into numbers, the word into a series of numbers, and then it does a statistical analysis of those numbers to kind of predict what the next word is. And then obviously when we add reasoning, there's additional things that happen, additional steps, additional tokens used. And so first of all, I just want to make the comment that like Opus is fantastic, but it's really token heavy. And so you guys have experienced this more than me because I'm on the $200 a month model, but you run out of tokens pretty quickly. And so I kind of give that context for people to say, use Claude Opus sparingly. So Claude Opus really should be for, really strategic deep work for stuff that's, like things like we're talking about, like building a PowerPoint deck, but also just really kind of analyzing a problem really deeply and those types of things, right? So should really be thinking about high level strategic work. Whereas Claude Sonnet, which is sort of the standard model, is kind of like your day-to-day workhorse. And it's really good. So Claude Sonnet does reasoning as well. It just doesn't think as hard and as deep and as long as Opus. And so you're going to use less tokens. It's faster, but it also gives you really good, deep, pretty thoughtful responses. And so, I would say basically for most strategic tasks, Sonnet actually probably is good enough. But if you really want to go deep and think really hard, that's when you might want to use Opus. And then there's a third model called Haiku, which is just for fast answers. And so Haiku is really good for summarizing these transcripts or, summarizing these meeting minutes or, just editing this document or I'm making pie and I don't have this ingredient. What ingredient should I replace it with? Like very quick, right? So very quick answers. And so that's kind of how I like to sort of explain them to people. And yeah, so kind of they describe Opus as it's most capable for what they call ambitious work. So for me, it's like, give you an example of some of the things I'm working with Opus on is I'm building an entire new sales strategies, playbooks, and technology stack from the ground up. And, asking it a lot of really hard questions about, why this technology? How can I create automations between these technologies? What are the steps to creating those automations? What do I need to do first? What's the order? So very, very deep. Like I would have never, like that would have taken me a year to go to do this work and I'm doing it in a matter of a week, right? So things like that. Whereas really Sonnet is your everyday use kind of tool.
I'll also add to like the kind of the 1 million token context window. Unfortunately, that's only through the API, which kind of sucks. It's not through the Claude app yet. I'm hoping it comes soon because I mean Gemini from the website itself supports that 1 million context window. But also, kind of in like a little bit of research, doing research for this episode, I was looking at Claude versus Sonnet, and Peter's right. Opus uses your usage a lot more, but I actually found that somebody did a test where they basically asked Sonnet and Opus to make like an entire blog with articles and all this stuff, and Opus actually used less tokens than Sonnet. However, Opus's token cost is much higher. So
Yes.
you will use your your Claude usage is based on dollars basically. Anthropic prices Opus tokens at much higher than Sonnet tokens. So even though it might use some tokens less than Sonnet, and even then Opus usually tends to write a lot more, so that might be like a rare occurrence that you might actually find that Opus does use more tokens overall, but even if it uses less, it's much more expensive per token, so you will eat your usage much more as well.
Yeah, and we've just got into a fairly technical conversation here. And it is important though to note, because if we're thinking about also building with these tools and like, Matthew mentioned the API and I'd listened to a blog the other day where they were just talking about just how expensive Opus is compared to like even ChatGPT's best model or Gemini's best model. And so, this is something that most people aren't going to need to be too concerned about yet. But as we start to connect to other tools, as we start to kind of get more sophisticated with the way we use these tools, cost is going to matter, right? And so, it's just something that I think people should, especially if you're kind of more on the advanced user side, you should start kind of understanding these things. Because the other thing I'll just say is it's not always beneficial to use the most powerful model. In fact, it's actually not usually beneficial. And so again, that's why we teach what we call AI intuition, which is like intuitively understanding which model to use when. One, we can help to guide you, but also like that comes with practice and use and trying different things and whatever, right? And so yeah, it's a complex kind of conversation to have, but an important one, I think.
I know the other day I asked like a pretty simple question and I realized just as I hit enter that it was like on Opus and I was like, no.
Yeah, stop. I've done that
My
many times.
usage. Yeah.
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 Yeah, it was crappy. Anyways, Peter, what's it like to like live so high up above us? We're
I
just
was
we're
gonna
just
say, yeah.
mere commoners down here on our $25 a month seats.
Yeah.
Joking.
Honestly, it's amazing.
Rub it in.
I don't
Rub
want
it
to
in.
sugarcoat it, but it's like so amazing. No, it's honestly so like obviously we talk about these limits and I know you guys our team is using Claude very extensively and people are running into sort of limits. And so I mean I'm just not running into limits. And I've had like literally so I explained when I was doing the keynote, when I was working on the keynote, I iterated and reiterated and went back and forth and like, created slides and like just constant like and it kept getting better and better and better and better. So like and I was talking to you guys, we were having this chat in our chat yesterday about like how, oh my God, I think it's $170 a month now. I think they've kind of reduced the fee a little bit, but oh my God, that's so much money. But actually, if you contextualize it, if you use the tools for the right reasons, it's actually not that much. So if I think about how long it takes me to create a brand new, on brand PowerPoint deck, I'm thinking probably 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I've been working on this in the airplane, at my son's hockey, like in my spare time. And I honestly have produced a deck that I'm so excited to deliver and is way nicer than anything I could ever possibly make by myself. So if I just think about the cost benefit of that, to me that the cost is a no-brainer. We need to sort of think about it organizationally to see who it might make sense to go to that level with. But having said that too, I just want to say that I do think that the cost of these things is kind of going to go down to almost zero over time. And so like usually what happens is these things come out and they're very expensive and then some competitor comes out with a competitive product and then they compete on price and the price comes down. So, I'm sort of, kind of at the forefront testing the highest and most expensive option available. But those things are coming down in price, and so everybody will have access to this power, probably in 3 to 6 months, kind of thing.
This is a
So
clear example.
I'm just taking one for the team
Oh
collectively, the
yeah.
entire tourism
We're not
industry, and just
worthy. We're
Yeah.
not worthy. I was
yeah,
going to say competition is a good thing. This is exactly why competition is a good thing.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, based on, our listeners are probably noticing a real theme in our podcast where we are talking a lot about Claude lately. Peter, what was like the catalyst? What was like the main thing that, you were using the tools for and you were like, no, Claude is the way forward now over ChatGPT as an
Yeah,
organization.
So a little bit of context for everybody is we were on ChatGPT teams initially as an entire organization, and that was great. And I was just starting to feel like ChatGPT or OpenAI was losing its way. It started putting out weird models, and it started to focus less on building really useful tools, I'll just say. And at the same time, everybody that's kind of a leader in the AI space was using Claude, and I will say Gemini as well. So we talk about Claude a lot, but we also use Gemini a lot. And so to me, it felt a little bit more like Anthropic and Gemini and Claude were making what I would just say more useful work tools. And actually Gemini and Google were doing the same thing. And so to me, it felt like, you know what, let's kind of make this switch now and let's kind of go to, and also the data was actually kind of verifying to me because enterprise adoption was really high. Companies were buying Claude more than they were buying ChatGPT. And so to me, all of those were signals that like, you know what, Claude is really focused here in terms of being the most useful tool for businesses. And so that's why we made the decision to make the change. I will say, I think OpenAI and ChatGPT got criticized for this and they've refocused. And so I don't want people listening to this thinking, oh man, I'm on ChatGPT and I'm not using a great model, because literally in the last 2 weeks, they've released some new models, new capabilities. I'm hearing their codex is even better than Claude's currently. And so I feel like they're back on track because I think they realize that by going in all these different directions, they're going to lose the plot. And so they kind of corrected course. So, I would just say that if you're on any of these three main models, you're in good shape. And, there's another kind of dark horse out there that nobody talks about, which is Grok, which is pretty amazing too, which is X AIs or Elon Musk's AI, but it doesn't get a lot of love for whatever reason, but it's actually a really capable, really good model as well. So, I would just say use the leading foundational models that we just talked about, and you're going to be in good shape. What I have been noticing lately, though, is people are using a lot of tools that are like wrappers on top of these models. And more and more, I'm noticing people using those. And while that's okay, I think you're missing a lot of really strong capabilities that just are baked into. I am a fan of these foundational models will eat all of those wrapper models over time, and they just come with features and benefits and things that those wrapper models don't have. And so, I'm not saying don't use the wrapper models. I'm just saying for me personally, kind of using these foundational models and really understanding what features and benefits they have and using them to I think I could do just about anything any wrapper model can do with these foundational models better, quite frankly.
Nice. Okay, I just want to quickly touch on Cowork. I think in our last episode, we mentioned that it was available on Mac, and now Anthropic has just released it available on Windows. So
Yes.
I personally have not had a chance to use it. Matthew, have you had a chance to use it at all yet?
Yeah, so I've tinkered around with it for the last couple weeks while it was available on Mac, and especially because we do these deep dives and sprints. Obviously part of the job is understanding how these things work and understanding how to explain them. And at first it was a bit confusing because it seems very similar to just regular Claude chat. One way that I would kind of explain it is basically instead of having to upload your files, like if you're uploading a few, Word documents and you're asking for an analysis, you can basically just give Claude access to a folder, keyword a folder on your computer where those documents are. And then Claude is able to read them, of course, but then also do work within those folders. A good example is if we're doing a sprint or something and we have survey results and we need to kind of customize our program for them, I would basically give Claude Cowork access to a folder and say, okay, here are the survey results. Here is our current presentation. Basically, make me a document of what we should tweak about it and what we should tweak for each, team member or each group. And so whereas if I had done that in a chat, for example, it would have given me an artifact that I would then download or open in Google Drive. It just created a file in my folder right there without me having to download or edit or anything like that. It's already formatted, ready to go. And so having that folder access, it's a more agentic. And even a basic example that I've seen before is I personally don't have a cluttered desktop with files everywhere, but I know a lot of people do. And so you can literally give Claude access to your desktop folder and it can organize all your files. It can rename your files based on what is in them. It can categorize them accordingly. It can put them into folders all within that one folder, kind of taking the next step with a little bit more agentic capability with Claude actually being able to do things rather than kind of just create stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So it can actually be in your applications, actually flicking around through your computer and stuff, which is pretty cool.
Okay, that might need to be my first use case. Desktop cleanup. Okay, we're going to jump ahead to our next story, which is that TripAdvisor launches ChatGPT-powered trip planning app. So basically, TripAdvisor has unveiled a ChatGPT-powered app designed to streamline trip planning through conversational AI. So this is interesting. Peter, if anyone's listening, you know that we preach book direct. So we want to keep tourism dollars in communities. Do you think that, adding TripAdvisor or having TripAdvisor add ChatGPT make them more dangerous to local businesses? Or do you think they're just becoming irrelevant anyways?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's more dangerous to local businesses, and I think that local businesses and DMOs need to really think hard about their role in the world because they're kind of getting swallowed up by these companies. And so, I think, we're going to talk about this at the end, but companies like TripAdvisor and other travel and tourism tech companies are all in on AI, whereas tourism operators and DMOs aren't so much. And so, I know, and I talk about this a lot, is when you're all in on AI, you're feeling like you're getting further ahead and kind of like leaving everybody in the dust. That's how I'm feeling currently. And I think companies like TripAdvisor are probably feeling that same way. And the gap keeps spreading. And so, I don't want to suggest it's too late, but it's certainly everybody needs to kind of go all in on this and figure out what their role is going to be going forward in this new AI and agentic era that we're in now.
Yeah, so I know that because of tools like ChatGPT and AI overviews and things, TripAdvisor search traffic has been declining. So this integration, I mean, do you think it's just an attempt for them to stay relevant?
I think it is. What's interesting is Google actually recently updated its algorithm. And so one of the things that Google is done in its algorithm is they're actually trying to reduce traffic to these third-party type aggregator sites and actually like serve up more local businesses. So it's going to be interesting to see how that actually impacts this, because suddenly I think Google is trying to like give the little guy a leg up again. And I think there's a good reason for that, because Google also needs to sort of remain relevant. And if it's basically just aggregator websites that it's serving up, I think in the long term that really causes a problem for local businesses, DMOs, because it's like, well, what's the point of me even trying to have an online presence when these guys are eating me up? And so I think to be determined. And I think Google's working hard to sort of make sure that small and medium-sized businesses, DMOs, regional DMOs kind of remain relevant. But I think it doesn't change the point that, all of those organizations need to figure out pretty quickly how to make sure that they remain relevant, they're visible for AI tools. I saw a stat the other day, and I got to find it for a presentation I'm going to do, but like, I think it's something like, I can't remember if it's either 40% or 60% of online traffic now is only humans. And the rest is AI bots, AI search engines, and other type crawlers and things like that. So, I was listening to a podcast the other day where they were kind of talking about like probably seems like 6 months and like the internet doesn't belong to humans anymore. And so, so what do we do? And it's a very interesting conversation to me. I don't have answers to it yet, but I think collectively as an industry, we really need to be like basically all in on thinking about this. And I'm going to be giving a presentation or be part of a panel at the BC Tourism Industry Conference where we're going to be talking about this disruption from this and kind of the role of DMOs and what we measure. There's a lot wrapped up into this topic, but yes, I do think that TripAdvisor is obviously doing everything they possibly can to stay at the forefront of all this and remain as relevant as possible.
Yeah, we've talked about this in past episodes too, that, I think, and Matthew, I'm pretty sure that you were the one who said that you use tools like TripAdvisor for reviews, not necessarily for booking. But we know that, reviews are being gamed and they're fake. So, does slapping ChatGPT on this kind of broken foundation really fix anything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think so. It's hard to tell. Like if you're just receiving these fake reviews in a different method, they're still the fake reviews. So, it'll be interesting to see if this does take off, if this, kind of effort on TripAdvisor's part, does anything. But I think, yeah, it's a tricky situation because, it's could, bring a lot of eyes on these businesses, but then it's like, you're not booking through them, or if, hopefully you are. I know for me, like if I were to, use that app, I would like use it to plan it and then go and book direct kind of thing. It's hard to like kind of gauge how to do that or how to get people to do that as well. But yeah, with the reviews, it's really hard to tell. I think that it's gonna be a lot more about servicing like what real people are saying, whether that's like a YouTube video or a TikTok or something, to really kind of validate that no, this is actually like a real review, or to check like the upvotes on views or things like that. Hopefully, like ChatGPT can kind of utilize that and filter out the fake TripAdvisor reviews.
Yeah, that would almost be like a really great use for it, is like actually helping try to filter out the fake ones. Right. Okay, in our final few minutes, we're just going to jump ahead here to our rapid fire round. So, Peter, kind of on a scale of 1 to 10, as usual, give your rating on some of these headlines that are in the news this week. The first one is European Commission proposes AI transparency rule for online travel agencies. And this regulation would require OTAs operating in the EU disclose when AI influences search rankings, pricing, or recommendations. And this is aiming to prevent algorithmic manipulation of travelers.
I love this. This is a 10 out of 10 for me, and I think that I think this is absolutely necessary because at the end of the day, trust is super important in tourism, and trust is super important with technology. And so I think that there's a lot happening right now, and these technologies are moving fast, and people need to feel like they can trust the information they're getting. And the information they're getting is, kind of being skewed in all kinds of different directions. So I think the more we can do to kind of maintain and preserve trust overall, the better. And so I love this, and I think I'd like to see more countries kind of start to go down this path. So we'll be watching this one fairly closely, and probably maybe writing some content and reporting on it.
Nice. The next one is airlines expanding AI chatbots to handle disruption management. So, major carriers, including Delta and United, are deploying AI assistants specifically trained to rebook passengers during weather delays and cancellations, reducing call center overload.
I think it's fantastic. Again, I'm going to give this a 10 out of 10. I think it's going to have a lot of challenges, and there's going to be a big learning curve, but I think doing this is better than not doing this. I think obviously when people are disrupted and, everybody's stressed out, I think just the ability to communicate in real time, the ability for people to kind of make decisions quickly. If, there's only so many humans that can handle all the like there's a lot that happens when all of these disruptions happen, and there's not enough humans to actually handle it. So perfect use case for AI, in my opinion. And so I very much encourage this as much as possible. And again, we'll be watching this closely. I actually flied United the other day. Flew United the other day, and I just found overall their tech experience was fantastic. I had some gate changes. I had all these kinds of things. It told me not only, hey, your gate has changed. This is your new gate. This is how long it's going to take you to get to your gate.
Oh, wow.
It was really good, really real time, and for me as a traveler, I really appreciated it. So yeah, the more tech, the better, especially in travel where things are kind of stressful and messy.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, next one. Google Maps adds AI-powered VibeCheck search for neighborhoods. So this is something they quietly rolled out as an experimental feature, and it lets users search for neighborhoods by the vibe, so like artsy, family-friendly, and it's using Gemini to interpret local business data reviews and foot traffic patterns.
Yeah, I find this one to be interesting. I won't give this one the 10 out of 10 I gave the others because I'm not quite sure yet how this is all going to sort of feel for people. But I will say this is a good plug for making sure your Google business profile is up to date. And again, I think to me, this is all about Google trying to find ways to make sure it stays as relevant as possible in this competitive landscape we find ourselves in, right? And I fundamentally think Google actually is going to win this game because they have so many different assets online and so many different channels and different ways to communicate to people. And so for me, I think this is great, but I think to be determined. Let's see how it works out. Let's see how accurate it is. And hopefully it sort of doesn't lead people astray.
So like a 6, 7, 6, 7.
I'll give it a 7 out of 10, sure.
Okay, the next one is Airbnb testing AI generated listing descriptions. So they are piloting AI tools that rewrite host provided descriptions into optimized conversion focused copy. Hosts can approve, edit, or reject. And internal data so far is showing a 12% lift in booking intent.
Yeah. I'd rate this as like a 6 out of 10 story for me. And only because to me, I feel like this now becomes table stakes for any kind of tech company like this. I think that, we see AI being kind of embedded into all technologies one way or the other. So I think this is sort of just what they need to do to remain relevant and to keep themselves at the forefront. So I think good for them. But this isn't like really anything that's going to kind of earth shattering or going to change the world too much. I just feel like this is just something they need to do to kind of remain relevant. So I think good for them though. And I think it will kind of, for me, it comes down to anything we can do to have better information and more full information to help people make better decisions is a good news story. And I just want to say overall, a kind of a message here, and I kind of alluded to this previously, Kendall, but all of these stories are essentially related somehow to tourism and travel tech. And again, just I want to iterate, tourism and travel tech companies are all in on AI, 100%. These stories show that. And so I think that, tourism operators and DMOs and other sort of non-tech companies really need to think about that, because if you get too far behind, I think it's going to be really hard to catch up.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we are going to wrap up here. So thank you both for the conversations. And for anyone listening, again, I'm just going to plug our new Substack account. So make sure you subscribe there. We'll put the link in the podcast description. And of course, subscribe to the podcast and follow us on our channels and all the self promotional things here at the end. But yeah, enjoyed the chat today, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.